Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen, and I am here in my little cabin in the woods, and we're into our third session for our opening day of our International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Book Club Reading Nation Convention. And we have with us the owner, Shari Stauch of Main Street Reads, and she has got some incredible authors with her that she's going to be introducing. So I'm turning the panel over to her.
Wonderful. We don't need to hear crickets. Come on now. Okay. So gang, what we did is I made sure and put everybody who's speaking to their websites off on the side in the chat. Okay. Plus the charity auction link and things. So you've got that going on. My name is Shari Stauch. I own Main Street Reads in Summerville, South Carolina. And I also do some author consulting through a company Where Writers Win. But I started life as a professional, career life, I should say, as a professional pool player. And very male-dominated sport, as I learned, and building a magazine for that sport and writing books in that sport, and then later helping market the Women's Pro Tour. And you also quickly learn in that sort of a setting where every question from every media personality always begins with, what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? The power of sisterhood and the power of the feminine. So that's something I really want to explore with these authors. They are all perfect to talk about this topic today. We're also going to speak about their work. Before I introduce them to you, I want to read you just a little something I found. I just went looking for some quotes on feminine. And I found this from Kellerman Institute, and I just wanted to share it with you. The feminine is clothed with strength and dignity. She smiles in the face of diversity. Feminine qualities, recognized elements of success, are a sought-after commodity. Women understand the worth of building relationships, communicating without need for status, listening for what's not being said. Women know human nature. We are nurturing. We are tough. We are solid. I just love that. So today with me, I have 4 incredible authors. As I said, Ruthie Landis. I know a lot of you Pulpwood Queens know her. Her new book out is My Musings, a guided journal. She's also has a couple of things in the hopper, both fiction and nonfiction. We'll talk about that. Debbie Baldwin, who writes a romantic suspense. She has brought bodice rippers into this century, and they're fabulous and titillating and erotic and intelligent, which I think is really a hard thing to do, and she does it absolutely brilliantly. Illicit Intent is one of my favorite books in the store. Regina Williams, who has a new collection of short stories out. I think Regina probably officially now has created more characters than William Shakespeare, but we'll talk about that a little bit. And last but certainly not least, Sarah Penner. I was sent Sarah's book early last year, before it was in print by HarperCollins. Fell in love with the book immediately, said, oh my God, this has got book club written all over it. Our book club did it last year. The Pulpwood Queen book club out of our store will do it this year when it comes out in paperback. So she'll get some more mileage there. And we have hand sold in our tiny store in Summerville outside Charleston, dozens of copies of her book already. She is wonderful. And it's a very, very empowering work. So with that said, I'm going to start with a few questions for our group, and they can chime in. And the guys, you know, this is super cash. So, you know, if somebody else wants to weigh in on something one of y'all is saying, please, by all means, do this. I really want this conversation to flow. Let's have some fun. Okay. So I'm going to start with Sarah. I'd like you to talk about your own interpretation of feminism in your work. So what points did you want to make about women and their role in history?
Yes. Thank you, Shari. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for everybody who's tuning in. I love the casual approach. I'm sorry I don't have a tiara, but just imagine and pretend that I do. I went through my costume stuff and I couldn't find one. So the role of feminism in The Lost Apothecary, you know, for anyone who's read the book, it's dual timeline. So we see half of the narrative take place in 1791 and half of the narrative take place in present day. And that's really fun for an author because you have the opportunity to compare and contrast what has changed for women between this era 200 years ago and today. And so some of what I did through the book was explore those differences and similarities. So some of the similarities, for instance, the desire for women to seek vengeance on men, the fact that women want to empower themselves with a way to get out of a bad situation, women questioning their choice to be a mother or not, women questioning what they want to do for work and their career. And then there are a lot of differences that are explored through the story as well. So our historical characters, they realize that if they were to leave their husband or end their marriage, they could be, it's a criminal offense. They could be thrown in jail. They would have no income or way to support themselves and their families. Whereas from a present day perspective, we see Caroline in London, and she's kind of revisiting her decision to be on birth control and go back to school and think about her job that she wants to do, not necessarily what her family and her husband have supported her in doing. So that was really one of the most interesting things as we think about feminism and just the opportunities that women have and don't have. It was interesting to me to explore what opportunities we have now that these women before us have worked for and really pushed for, but then there's still so many things that we deal with today as women that women have always been dealing with, like trust and betrayal. So that compare and contrast has been one of the most rewarding parts of writing the book.
Outstanding. Outstanding. That dovetails nicely into Regina. Regina, I know a lot of your short stories kind of written through the 50s up to present day also deal with a lot of women who are marginalized in different ways. Can you speak to that a little bit? Do you have the same kind of goals to bring that out?
Yeah, the characters in my book primarily reflect a lot of what I have experienced in my own life, in that we deal with racism, sexism, and any other ism that anybody wants to throw at us. So as a result, the characters reflect how our community expands and contracts. So for instance, in stories that take place in the 50s with a child who's 14 years old, she only has her family to help her to move forward against whatever the situation is. The other characters grow in time, not that it's one story. As you know, there are quite a few stories and quite a few characters. But the reality is that whole, all the isms come to play in your life, in your community, depending on where you live. So in the 50s in New York may have been different from the 50s in the South, but what you realize is that you still are treated poorly, to say the least. So all those isms come to play, not just, it's economic, it's social, it's financing, it's housing, it's all those things come to play in a way that's different from your larger society. So a lot of the characters then reflect that, or at least I try to have them reflect that.
Yeah, reflect and illuminate. I mean, they just they illuminate so many areas, which I so much appreciate about your work. So moving on to Debbie, whose female characters are unapologetic and very modern and very hip and very cool. Debbie, talk about that a little bit. How do these intelligent, gorgeous, hot, serious women speak through you? What have been some of your goals there in putting them on the page?
It's interesting because my genre, which is romantic suspense, there are certain expectations with the storyline. Imagine going to see a rom-com in the movie theater. You know what you're getting. There's a formulaic element there that is not only reassuring, but it's required, really. The film would not be a romantic comedy if, the handsome guy dies at the end, or, it's something else. So my challenge as a writer is, taking the storyline of a romance. And well, and it was interesting to me too, when you speak of the feminine, that there is a power in embracing the feminine, as opposed to trying to make female characters more masculine. They're augmenting the feminine traits of intuitiveness and empathy and intelligence and communication skills, without necessarily making the female character, a cop, or, not, that's certainly a viable option, but that's not the option I chose. I chose to keep the women in whatever career path the character, fit the character for me, and embrace that sort of feminine power. And the way I do it in my romantic suspense books is to level the playing field with the men, in the sense that the characters are not the same, but they are equal. They both bring a quality and a skill set to the relationship that is complementary. And I think it modernizes romance without losing that traditional compatibility and kind of hug your Kindle and damsel in distress moment that, readers are looking for in a book like that.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, and very true. So Ruthie, last but not least on this particular area. So talk to me about, up till now, and we're going to talk a little bit about the fiction that you're working on, but you've written predominantly nonfiction. And in your practice, I know you work with men and women. Talk to us, because you have this great bird's eye view that I think a lot of us don't. What differences do you see that have had to translate themselves to the written word, depending on who you're writing to and how?
Well, so I want to go back to your wonderful quote at the beginning, because, men can have the feminine energy too. It doesn't mean that they don't have that. And we want yin and yang balance, right? So there's a difference, right, between power and empowerment. So power, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. If we think of power in the masculine sense, it has that kind of lack of self-awareness or lack of reach toward the higher good. And empowerment is something quite different, I think. To be truly empowered, a woman has to know herself. She has to know her package. She has to know how to stand in who she is without shame, with compassion, with humility, which really means to assess herself accurately, not to self-deprecate or to, inflate. So I think that there is a through line in my work always. I guess it's my particular mission statement, which is to help people grow to know themselves very, very well, and to know in what ways they hide from themselves, keep secrets from themselves. And when we hide from ourselves and we're spending a lot of time keeping secrets, right, we really can't stand in our power, in our empowerment. We really can't be present for other people. And if we're not able to be present, then what does any of that mean? I mean, it has to have a thrust beyond survival, beyond dominance, beyond status, as you read in your quote. And I think that whether you're a male or a female, if you are on a road to self-development and to being your own best friend, so you can be good friends to everybody else, it really doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. You have a thrust or an intention to show up in the world in a certain way.
Very good. Very good. All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you each a little something more about your own work. I'm going to start with Regina on this one. So because of the various characters, which again, I don't know how you keep them all in your head. It's brilliant. But what appeals to you most about this short story form? And I would also like to know, at the same time that it appeals to you, have you found it limiting, excuse me, in any way? And are there characters you'd like to revisit, to expand upon in a novel in future?
Well, I guess you have to understand that I started with poetry.
Okay.
So for me, the short story is a novel.
Comparatively speaking, yes.
Right, exactly. So I love the short story form because it allows me to develop characters, to tell the story, to get to the essence of what I really want to say. At the same time, I don't have to stay there indefinitely. I can release and go someplace else and do something else with another character. So that appeals to me. I like the idea of a novel. I don't know that I have what it takes at this point to write a novel. However, having said that, because people have been poking at me about that, I have begun to think in terms of how would I go about writing a novel. And the only thing that keeps recurring in my head is that I would do it in a series of short stories. That's the way that's the way I would approach it at this point in time.
And connect them then? And then connect them, basically?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of characters, there are characters I could envision carrying forward. One is a 14-year-old Cara. And the reason I could carry her forward is because her father is from Ireland. Her mother is an African-American born in the northern part of the United States. Her parents are nurses, but they've lived overseas most of her life. So she's got that broad range of experience and exposure. So she's a character that I could conceivably move forward. I have another character, Makeda, and I could see using her because she sees spirits. And I like that concept of using spirit because we are spirit. And in my point of view, we are spirit, and that's so integral to who we are, but it also broadens the field for what she can see and know and hear, etc. So I like that character. And finally, there's one male, and I like him because he's a scoundrel. He's a straight up scoundrel, but I like him because he's an intelligent scoundrel. He seeks education. And that's important. And in my community, education is, you move forward with education and real estate. All right. There's nothing else. That's what that is. So I like him because of that. And the fact that he is a scoundrel means that I can play. So those are the characters that come to mind. I'm sure if I thought about it a little more, I could conjure up 5 more characters.
Love a good scoundrel.
Shari, you're muted. You're muted, Shari.
Sorry, I muted because my son's dog is making a fuss in the background. I was going to say, I'm going to hold you to that. So it is being recorded. It's there for posterity. So y'all, we're going to hold her to seeing some more of those characters. Now we're going to go to the polar opposite of that with Debbie. Debbie's characters not only blow it out in a novel, but then they come back within the Bishop Security series. So Debbie, tell me a little bit about which is your favorite of your books to date, and why? And I'm going to tell you after that. I won't color the audience. I'm going to tell you mine and my absolute favorite female character.
Well, I have to say, had I had any idea the complexity of a series where the timelines overlap in the books, where you're writing a chapter and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this guy can't be here. He's in Mallorca, like on a mission, like from the book before. It's my, head will explode. Like you, my favorite book in the series is Illicit Intent. It's told in dual timelines. It kind of recreates my historically fictional version of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum robbery, which took place in the 90s, where 13 priceless works of art were stolen and never recovered. And it's been kind of an obsession of mine for a long time. And so there's a present day timeline where a piece of art resurfaces, and there is the backstory leading up to the original robbery. And let me just give a shout out to Sarah while we're talking about dual timelines, because The Lost Apothecary is such an incredible book.
Yes,
I
yes,
absolutely
yes.
adored it.
Amazing.
I have it on my reread stack, so which is much shorter than my TBR. But so yeah, there's a continuity to writing, a series. All the characters live in the same world, and so keeping these characters consistent throughout these what will be 8 books is definitely a challenge, but it's so fun. And I actually just saw this very interesting little clip of Quentin Tarantino where he said when he writes a movie, he starts writing the screenplay and gets about halfway through, and he said at that point the characters take over and tell the story for him, and he just lets them go wherever they're going to go. And I thought, what a great way to kind of encapsulate, like when you're really kind of onto something, that these characters live and breathe in the pages and that they can kind of take the story for you was such a neat concept. And I'm, want to emulate that as much as I can.
Very cool. See, now that's perfect. So Sarah, as readers, we develop this, extraordinary empathy for Nella, and we root for her, but, ultimately, technically, she might not be a good person. I don't want to do any spoilers here. So if anyone has a problem with spoilers, we don't want to do that. But was this your intention with this particular character from the get-go, to have that sympathy, that empathy for her, or did she kind of speak to you as you went?
Well, thank you, first of all, Debbie, for the lovely shout out about dual timelines. It was not always fun to weave that together, but somehow it came out okay. And Shari, to your point about spoilers, as we get into the conversation about Nella's morality or lack thereof, the reader pretty much learns on the first page of the book that she is a killer. So it's really not a huge spoiler. But the story is meant to uncover why she is doing what she's doing and what some of the second order effects are. And I knew from the get-go that I wanted her to be morally gray. And part of that is because I think that's really a reflection on all of us, if we're honest. I think every day, most of us probably do mostly good things, but then there's a few things in there that if we could take them back or do them a little bit differently, we probably would. That's not to say any of us hopefully are dispensing poison in food and wine, but I don't know, maybe someone is.
Only in eggs, only in eggs.
Only in eggs, right. But I definitely wanted to play with the reader's opinions a little bit, because I think when we open up a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you don't necessarily want to provide all the answers black and white for the reader. I think there's a lot of opportunity to make the reader ask a question, and how do I feel about this particular scene or character? And so throughout the story, the reader is supposed to understand, okay, Nella's a killer. She's providing poisons to women. But as we learn her motivations and her reasoning and her pain, and we talk about vengeance and justice, it's supposed to make the reader kind of second guess maybe their initial opinions of her. And actually in the book club kit for The Lost Apothecary, this is one of the first questions is, for the reader, what do you think of Nella? Is she a bad person? Is she a good person? Is she somewhere in between? In my personal opinion, as the author, she's somewhere in between. I can see why she has done what she's done, but I think there maybe would be more productive or effective or moral ways to solve the problems that she's helping women solve. But it's fiction, and that's one of the things that we can do, is have the reader dig deep and ask what they think of the character's motivations.
Yeah, but and I would say that's true in present day, but for me, was that possibility for other solutions possible in that timeline, and kind of not as much. Yeah,
That's exactly
So I
right. And it kind of
that
ties back.
legitimizes it. Yeah.
Yeah, it ties back to that first question you asked about feminism and what opportunities women have now that they didn't used to have. And you're exactly right. I mean, if a woman couldn't leave her marriage without being out on the streets, what other option did she have except maybe to just get rid of him altogether and be taken in by his family or something similar?
Yeah.
And,
So,
and
Ruth-
can I just say something
Yes.
about,
Yeah.
so, and also, I felt like Nella has a morality too. I mean, she has remorse, she has regret, right? And at the same time, at this one point where this person wants to poison a woman, not a
Yes.
man, she says, no, that I won't do that. I won't poison a woman because I can walk a mile in her shoes. And so
Yes.
I think, like, it's not as if she doesn't have some value system. She does. It might not be what we think, would be the best possible one, but given the time that she grew up in and her skill set, with herbs and all of that, but she does a lot of good in her own way too. And she does have a cutoff, I think, on what's moral for her and what isn't.
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you, Ruthie. I agree wholeheartedly.
So, Ruthie, to that, I know that that you're now working on a novel. So you've taken all this nonfiction, and I know that you've also, of course, been inspired over these last few years by so many of the character discussions that you've heard at Pulpwood Queens. Tell me what you're enjoying most about working in this genre. Does it expand
Well,
things for you to be able
well,
to do that character building?
Yeah. So I was into the shower this morning thinking about that very question and going, what is the answer to that question? And so, I'm simultaneously working on a book called The Enneagram, Relationships, and the Shadow. And we've been talking about the shadow, right? What is gray? What is dark? What is light in people? And that's called Loving the Unlovable. So it's interesting to work on a nonfiction at the same time I'm working on my first novel, right? Because they feed each other. They're like feeding. So in answer to your question, like so this morning I had a session at 8:00 in the morning with the most wonderful man. And he was struggling so much, people around him dying. He is HIV positive. He just is facing so much stuff in his life. And we were kind of talking about, the hero's journey that we each have and everything. And he said, why are you writing this novel? And I said, I never thought of myself as writing a novel in a million years. Like, my whole life's trajectory has been so strange. If you were to look at it above, you'd say, oh yeah, that all makes sense. But I started out as an actor, director, taught acting for many, many years. And then somehow segued in becoming a body-centered psychotherapist, and always kind of with that mission of self-awareness, self-growth, all that stuff. But never in my wildest dreams, I knew that I could write these nonfiction books that tell stories, lots of stories, lots about the hero's journey and stuff. But a novelist? No, that's like, oh my God, a novelist. Studied novels, adapted novels into theater pieces, adapted short stories into theater pieces, but write a novel. And then I got in Kathy's community, lucky me, and I got to listen to all you people. And I was like going, now just wait a minute here. Like I am always saying to people, do something courageous every day, right? And I thought, I wouldn't have thought this was where I was headed, but so many people that read novels do not read self-development books. And I thought, what if I could create all the things that I work with, dream work and the Enneagram, which is 9 worldviews, I don't even want to say personality types. I want to say like full embodied lenses with which people come to life, and have taught master classes for writers and stuff using the Enneagram, right? And then shamanic work and magic kinds of stuff that I do with my clients, and the interconnectedness of all of us, right? And I thought, well, if I'm interested in impact in that way, why couldn't I weave that into a story, and that it might have the most impact of all? So that's what my novel is about. And the fun that I'm having with it is that I'm at the stage, early stage of creating a structure for it with my niece. So my niece, who's sort of on a journey with me of self-discovery, we meet every Wednesday evening for 2 hours, and we brainstorm about all these characters and how they're interconnected with each other, and how one tragic event brings all of them, these 9 characters, to their knees and gives them the opportunity of the character arc, to make their life matter, to change, to transform, to metamorphose. And so I guess I'm writing this novel because it's a courageous thing for me to do. I could fail miserably.
Well, and and I can see that. And it's like you said, you can affect other people who don't normally read in the space that you write in. So it can become a very purpose-driven exercise. Yeah.
Right.
So Regina, that brings me back to you a little bit, because I want to talk about, as you're building a story, because I know a lot of yours have also been purpose-driven. But tell me, is it the situation that calls to you as you embark on a story, or is it the characters, or some of both? Did I lose Regina?
I think she's muted.
Unmute yourself, Regina.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Each story kind of finds its own way. Sometimes it is an issue, some that will motivate me. Sometimes I'm trying to work through something. So it's the story evolves because I have a question without an answer, and I write the story seeking the answer. But the thing that I absolutely love is that, I think someone mentioned this earlier, you start with a character and you think you know what that character is doing, but they will come and tell you, no, that's not what I want to do. I've had a character wake me up in the middle of the night to tell me that his name was not what I had named him. Okay. And so I thought, all righty then. I got up and I came to my computer and I made the correction and I went back to bed. But I think all of it works together in the sense that there are issues that I feel a writer has to address in this society, particularly as a woman, particularly as a person of color. You don't have necessarily the luxury of being frivolous in some instances. You do take time to do that because we're human, and that's the deal. But there's also a responsibility. And so these characters kind of decide who and what they are after you have decided who and what they are. And it sort of works together and you learn. I think it's a learning process for me as well. It's a teaching, it's a learning, it's a growing.
And very good. How about you, Debbie? Kind of the same sort of question. Again, I know that you have to keep a little bit to a formula, and guys, Debbie also has some experience in television and production and things, so she's real good on all of that. But for you, I know that you have some principal strong characters, but you also have some really solid and intricate storytelling. Which governs you first or most?
Well, it's interesting. Every time Ruthie speaks, I have to muzzle myself because I want to be like, yes, 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 all the time. And I should be writing down Ruthie's words of wisdom. But Ruthie, when you were saying that that your nonfiction book and your novel kind of inform each other, the book I just finished, the fourth book, and the main character is recovering from a severe trauma and has had, a tragic event happen, and it's changed him, and he's off, kind of trying to rediscover himself. And at the same time, I was reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which, if you guys have never read it, it's the most inspiring thing. So to have that kind of informing this character's journey was, it was just such an amazing experience to do both at the same time. But Shari, what was the question?
Well, just no, I think you kind of got there. Just sort of, what informs your work, character,
Yeah,
story.
and I would say that my stories are plot driven, but I adore my characters, and it's so funny because people are like, oh, you must have a favorite, or and I'm waiting to hear your favorite. I have a guess, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so the characters, illicit intent is bar none my favorite. I love it. I love the intricacy of it. I love that it takes place everywhere. I get to travel within it, especially these days when I don't get to travel. And I love my favorite character, which I hope that she has an entire series all her own, is your little female cat burglar. Oh
and Clara. And
yes, Clara.
Imagine, and she's a very small role in that book, but she does steal a painting. And I had the very good fortune of having a friend from college who is a curator at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. So imagine him getting a phone call saying, how would one steal a painting? And he happily told me. Not from the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, however.
Nice. Oh, very funny.
But
so Sarah,
she's getting her own story. So
very cool. Good. I adore Clara. And again, she came from nothing, kind of a ragamuffin. She reminds me of a female young Heathcliff,
Yes.
Out of
like
Wuthering
French
Heights.
Oliver Twist.
Yeah, there you go. She's just fantastic. This little orphan that ends up being just kind of stunning, really. So Sarah, I want to ask you, and I've seen this question asked before too. I've seen some interviews with you and stuff, but I love to talk about this aspect. Your historical fiction, but you kind of also fall within the magical realism subgenre. So let's talk about why that magical realism is important to the story, and how you think it's supposed to, or it has, from what others have said to you, affect the reader's experience as the story goes along.
So I love writing. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about character motivations, how the reader kind of gets to engage with the story by asking how they feel about certain things that the characters are doing. And magical realism is really another form of making the reader wonder, what they're seeing, what they're reading, and what's really happening. So for anyone who's not familiar with this subgenre of magical realism, it's basically posing the question, is this event or circumstance the result of magic, or is it realistic and actually happening in the natural world? And there are a lot of questions that I get, especially from book clubs, and they want to know certain things that happened through the story. Was that magic, or did that actually happen? And I'd love to provide a couple of those, but they would kind of get us into spoiler territory. But I always say, if I, as the author, wanted you to know whether it was magic or real, I would have said whether it was magic or real. The fact that I leave that door open and provide that gray area means that I want you as the reader to kind of decide for yourself. So again, it's my asking the reader to do a little bit of work and have a little bit of fun with the story. And I find myself leaning that direction with my next project as well, which I think we'll probably talk about in a few minutes, but it's not magic, but there are other things in the world, supernatural things or occurrences, where I would like the reader to kind of decide, what are they really seeing and what's genuine here, or what is maybe illusion or a fake or a trick. So I think it really contributes to the reader's experience, because again, they just kind of have to ask themselves what they're seeing and what's true. And then I think also magic in general is so enchanting, and particularly this idea of witchcraft we see a lot of that in historical fiction. Anytime we talk about tinctures or kind of blending together these enchanting oil blends, readers love that. And we kind of all, I think, want to lose ourselves in this fictional possibility that with the right tincture or the right spell or the right incantation, we can make otherworldly things happen. And probably all of us have, even those of us who follow our astrology or, we're aware of the winter or summer solstice, those are all things that are kind of rooted in magic and witchcraft. And so they apply to our lives more than we realize. And I think readers love to explore that in fiction and maybe see some possibilities that we are hopeful for, but haven't yet experienced in our own lives.
Well, that's kind of full circle. That brings us back to the feminine, because all of those older things that you talk about came, much of that came out of a matriarchal society too. So it's very interesting. So what I'm going to throw out this question to all of you. Anyone can jump in first.
Great. Shari, we have 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yes, no worries. Just tell us what you're working on now. What's going to be next to hit the shelves? Quickly.
My
Another
fourth book
collection?
is called Past Purgatory, and it's going to be hitting the shelves, I think, the first week in March, probably a little later, if my pattern serves. And it's just the next story in the series.
Very good.
And I'm working on another collection of short stories. It's just beginning, so it's kind of early, so it doesn't have a title yet.
Okay.
All right.
And I'm, as I said, hopefully this spring will be released Loving the Unlovable. And then my novel, God knows, it's called Illumination Ink. So it goes with the tinctures and the magic and everything that Sarah was talking about.
Awesome. And Miss Sarah.
And my next book hasn't been announced, but it's coming out next year. I'm turning it into my editor next week, and it is about ghosts in Victorian London.
Ooh, yeah. Very cool.
Great.
That's fantastic. All right. Anybody have a last question or comment?
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.
Yes,
You
thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great
Very
group.
diverse and so interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you, everybody.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, we'll be going to end this session. Thank you, Shari. Thank you,
You're
Sarah, Debbie, Ruthie, Regina. Awesome panel. And come back after lunch, you all, because we've got Lovelace Cook with Bollywood and books. Wait till you see my outfit. So,
Fun.
bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
All right. Y'all
Thank
have
you
a
so
great day.
much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.